Hey guys, it's Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. Today's video is going to be my top 10 books that I read in 2021. You guys know, aside from being an avid planner, I am an avid reader and I love to read. And I'm going to share with you guys the top 10 books that I read. Surprisingly, this is the year that I read a ton of nonfiction, and 5 of those nonfiction made it to my top 10. So I read really good books. This past year, it seems like the real stories were more interesting to me than made up stories for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. I'm going to start with the first story that I don't have an actual copy of, and that is because it's an Audible original story and it's a memoir. It's Unspoken by Luke Daniels. Luke Daniels is apparently some big sci-fi narrator, audiobook narrator, but in him we follow the story of his son, who was born with a disability, and we follow him through the journey of having to deal with taking care of a special needs child, and through his grief as a father, how it affected his family, not just his immediate family, but his family at large, and how he copes with the death of his child. It's not a spoiler to say that his child died, because it's advertised as a memoir of grief or something like that. It's a really touching story. I cannot imagine having to go through that with a child, and especially even as a healthcare provider, that is the reason why I don't work with kids, because I could never work with sick children. And it's a really touching story, heart-wrenching, and if you have Audible, try to check it out, see if that's still available on Audible. It's an Audible original story. Try to see if it's there. It's worth the read. It's not the listen. It's not very long. I think it's about 3 hours long, and I always listen to it at 1.75, so it was even faster than 3 hours. So that's the first one I want to talk about. The other 9 I do have here with me, but I'm going to try to alternate fiction and nonfiction, so you guys are not like bored if you're into nonfiction. If you're not into nonfiction, I will leave my favorite book from the year for the very last. So try to guess in the comments if you guys know what it is. But anyway, the next book that I'm going to talk about, my next favorite, is The Girl in the Blue Coat by Monica Hesse. In this book, we follow a girl named Hanneke, who is this is set during the Nazi time, and we follow the girl Hanneke, who has a side job that is illegal. She finds objects that are illegal according to the Nazis for people, and they pay her to get that stuff for them. Everybody kind of like knows who she is, so this other lady asks her to help her find someone, and that someone was a Jew refugee. So she's like, I don't want to get involved, you know, especially trying to find a Jew, and like just knowing that this other lady was harboring a Jew is kind of like a big deal, you know, it's already dangerous. So she's like, no thank you, I don't want to get involved. But as she learns more about the girl and how she was living with this lady and how she disappeared, it piques her interest. So she starts doing a kind of a detective job in trying to find out the girl in the blue coat. So it's a really interesting time. If you guys like historical fiction and kind of a mystery aspect, you guys would really enjoy this one. Highly recommend. In general, I really enjoy books set during the World War II era. So yeah, I think that's a good one. The next one that I read that is up there in my list of favorites is Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. I am not a fan of Matthew McConaughey. I could care less about him. I know everybody's kind of like in Texas is very like big, or I guess interested in Matthew McConaughey, but it's like he's like whatever to me. I've never thought he was good looking, especially in the movies where he played the heartthrob. It's like whatever. And his life never really interested me. But I saw this book on Book Outlet. It was super cheap, and I was like, what the heck? This is super interesting. knowing about how he grew up and the things that he did, it was super interesting. Like, he's had a very interesting life, and he doesn't come from money, and he hasn't let Hollywood and the fame change him. I think he still kept himself pretty humble, and he has a thing. And then I think that that's what makes him so relatable to a lot of people. Very, very interesting story. It's not very long. I read it super fast. And I think if you are into memoirs, like Hollywood memoirs, this is a good one, because it's not, I've read other Hollywood memoirs that are kind of like funny and they have like no depth to the story. This has some substance to it. I highly, highly recommend, if you're into memoirs, Hollywood memoirs, that's a really good one. The next one that I'm going to talk about is The Brilliant Life of Eudora Honeysett by Annie Lyons. We follow Eudora, who is a little lady in her 80s, who is just kind of done with life. She has no family. She's made a plan to leave Earth on her own terms, and she's kind of been working on that. And then suddenly the next door neighbors move in, and they have a little girl. The little girl is one of those, she's at that age where she's very curious about everything, and she's asking a lot of questions, and Eudora kind of reluctantly befriends her, and then she becomes friends with the little girl's parents, and they kind of take her in as family. And so Eudora starts discovering what it is to be part of family, what it is to be taken care of, and what it is to be loved. And so she's second guessing her decision to kind of like, you know, leave Earth, and how she wants to do it. So super touching story. I loved it. This took me by surprise. I had never heard anybody talk about this book before, and people should talk about this book because it's a really good story. It touches on different subject matters that are very important, I think, and I really enjoyed it. The next book that I have here is Dopesick by Beth Macy. Dopesick was turned into a Hulu series. If you guys have Hulu and you don't like to read, which if you don't like to read, what would you watching this video? But anyway, if you have Hulu, you should watch that show. It's super depressing. But Dopesick, it talks about the epidemic of narcotics addiction in the United States, in specific, not fentanyl. What is the drug? Oh my gosh. I'm like so drawing a blank on what the drug they're talking about here. But we follow how mainly the story of the Sackler family, who owned Purdue Pharma, how they pretty much had like no scruples, I guess you can say, in regards to advertising their medication as non-addictive when it clearly is, and that is what created this whole epidemic of dependency on narcotics in the US. Very like angering, because it's just there's corruption within the system that allows people to get away with things like this, and even though they see what is happening, they kind of turn a blind eye to the situation. And it's just, I was very angry when I read this book, and the fact that it's real. Again, as working in healthcare, I've seen it before where patients are just unfortunately just seeking, we call them pain seeking, when they come in and they're like, I'm allergic to ibuprofen, Tylenol, morphine, Dilaudid, like everything except the one medication that's going to take away their pain. And it's heart-wrenching, and it's infuriating that there's people out there who do it for their own gain, not caring how it affects other people. So this is very, very interesting. I highly, highly recommend to see it. You guys read it if you're into nonfiction. And if you're not into nonfiction, watch the show on Hulu. It's a heavy subject matter. It's very sad. It's not a fun series to watch, but it's very interesting, and it gives you a huge perspective on what it is going on with the whole opioid epidemic. Another favorite this year is Allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson. In this book, we follow Mary, who has just served 5 or 6 years, I think, in what she calls baby jail, because she has been accused of murdering a baby. And this is a book that even after I finished, like, I don't know who to believe. Mary is a very unreliable narrator, and everybody around her tells the story differently. So I felt like I didn't know who to believe even after the story finished, because when Mary is telling you the story, she's like, I did this and I did that and I did this allegedly. So she always finishes with allegedly when she's talking about what she's being accused of. So it's like, okay, you think she's telling you the story of what happened, but then she ends with like, well, they said I did that allegedly. So it's like, oh, girl, did you do it or did you not do it? So this is one of those books that after I finished reading it, I kept thinking about the ending over and over and over, because I wanted to know, like what is the truth? Like, because you didn't tell me what happened. So this is another one of those infuriating, addicting stories. If you're into, I guess, suspense, I guess you can say this is suspense. What is it? I don't know. It's because I don't know. It has an open-ended ending, I guess you can say, and suspense. I don't know. It's really good. Highly, highly recommend. The next book that made it to my favorites list is Defying Jihad by Esther Ahmad and Craig Borlacy. In this book, we follow the life story of this girl named Esther. It wasn't Esther. She changed her name. But Esther's family has had generations of extremist Islamic people. Like she has had family die for Islam as suicide bombers and stuff. And so she has always been rejected by her father because she was born a woman and not a man. And so I think her cousin or somebody in her family was supposed to be going on to this training camp to become suicide bombers. And so she decides to join to bring honor to her family, because she's always felt rejected by her dad. And so it happens that the day before she's supposed to go to extreme Islam camp, she comes across the story of Jesus Christ, and she starts thinking about it and wanting to learn more about it. Eventually, through hiding and postponing going to extremist Islam camp, she converts to Christianity. Her family finds out. They try to hunt her to kill her. She ends up fleeing the country, eventually made it to the United States, and she hasn't seen her family ever since, because she obviously disgraced her whole family by converting to Christianity. So this is a very, I think, true to the times, like seeing what people do things for Christianity. I think sometimes us Westerners take Christianity as a given, and we don't see what other people go through in order to, believe what we believe here on the Western. Not everybody, of course, but the Western, it's more of a Christianity, falls under the Christianity umbrella. And so it was very interesting to see what she went through in order to believe what she believed in. So it was very, very good. Highly, highly, highly recommend. The next book I want to talk about is The Fountains of Silence by Ruta Sepetys. This is a book that is happening around the Spanish Civil War during the dictatorship of the dictator. I don't know his name. I didn't even know up until the point I read this book that Spain had a dictatorship in its history. So that's something I learned. But in this book, we follow the stories of two teenagers. We follow Daniel, I think is his name, who comes from a rich family and kind of has like his future already mapped out for him. He's going to go to university like his family has planned, but his goal is to be a photographer. And then we follow Anna, who is not as fortunate as he is. Eventually their paths cross, and as Daniel's kind of like resigned himself to be like, okay, well, I'm gonna go to university and I'm gonna study what my parents want me to study, and my photography is kind of like, it's gonna go away. And as him and Anna start spending more time together, he starts developing a passion for photography even more, the more he learns about Anna and what Anna's been through. And so eventually we find a secret that has been hiding from Daniel and his family, and we follow the repercussions of Daniel finding out what happens. So this is a really, really good book. Ruta Sepetys really knows how to write historical fiction with heart. It's not, she doesn't try to sensationalize it. It's just, she gets you to care about the characters and to care about what's happening in this time in history when these characters are living through. So highly, highly recommend. Again, if you enjoy Ruta Sepetys, if you enjoy historical fiction, she is a good one to read. The next book I want to talk about is It's Not Supposed to Be This Way by Lisa TerKeurst. This book, I love Lisa TerKeurst. I think I've read all of her books except Made to Crave. I don't think I've read that book, but in this book we discuss the topics of being disappointed when things don't go your way and when you kind of want to give up and just kind of throw in the towel, and how we are meant to persevere through the hard times and how we need to just pick ourselves up and kind of, as cliche as it sounds, know that the things that happen for a reason, and we need to understand it and not let it defeat us, but instead let us be stronger. Even though we're disappointed, we're heartbroken, we're frustrated, there's always a reason to push through, and we will always come out stronger and better than we were before. So it's a very uplifting book. Really, really enjoy Lisa TerKeurst. She doesn't come out as preachy. This is Christian living, but she doesn't come out preachy. She doesn't come out as like telling you what to do, and she's just a really relatable author, even for someone who is not married or has kids. I find sometimes when women write these kind of stories, they tend to focus more on family, but she makes it a really good point on making sure that all women, doesn't matter what kind of stage in life they're in, they find her material relatable, and I really, really do find it relatable. Really, really enjoy her books. And the last book that I'm going to show you guys, my favorite book of the year. It sounds kind of dark and twisted, but it's My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This book stayed with me even till this day. Like, I think about this book and it makes me feel all the emotions that I was feeling when I was reading it. In this book, we follow Vanessa, two timelines, one in 2000 and the other one in 2017. And we follow how Vanessa as a teenager is groomed by, was it her teacher? Yes, her English teacher. She is groomed by her teacher, and she is mentally abused, physically abused, emotionally abused, sexually abused, but she thinks she's in love with her teacher. And it happens until almost 20 years later in 2017 when she realizes that she was being manipulated. And all these years when he was stringing her along, even after he was no longer her teacher, he called and she would go. And you see how slowly, like, she starts realizing, like, this is not normal, this is not love, this is not how things are supposed to be. And we follow, it's a dual timeline. We go back and forth between when she first met him, and we kind of see how he kind of like infiltrated into her life. And on the second timeline, we see how slowly the layers, like the blinders, are coming off from her, and she's realizing, like, this is not a good thing I'm in. It's infuriating. I had like anger issues apparently in 2021. It's just like, it was so angering, and it's just like, I'm so mad. Like, Vanessa, open your eyes, it's not good for you. But I enjoyed this book. Like, I want to reread it again because I liked it that much. So you guys haven't read it, read it. It's a good one. It was super hyped. I think around maybe the beginning of the year, springtime, maybe even summer. Everybody was talking about My Dark Vanessa, and it's one of those books that deserves all the hype that it gets because it is really that good. So there you have it, guys. Those are my favorite books from 2021. I hope you guys enjoyed. I did end up reading 125 books. I already set my goal on Goodreads for how much? I think I put 80 books because I don't want to set the goal too high and then having to force myself to like read in order to meet the goal. Like I want to enjoy what I read. So there you have it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.